My name is Leah, and I go to Georgia Ranch High School, and I'm a senior, and I love dancing, I love singing, and my passion is Jesus.
For some people, surprising things can happen when you least expect them. For Leah, that happened one day at her job.
The story I'm about to share with you is actually pretty crazy. There was one night when I was working at Kroger, and two customers came in my line, and they were super friendly. And they made a statement, and they were like, "You kind of look like someone I know." And I kind of brushed it off my shoulder and didn't pay it any attention until I decided to bring it up to my mom. And I told her, and I was like, this couple came in, and they told me that I look like someone they knew. And the only reason I told her that is because I'm adopted, it could be anyone. And a couple months went by, and I paid it on mine, and a boy came in my line, and he invited me to go to his church. So I decided to look the church up, and I looked it up because I didn't want it to be a scam. Everything's happening nowadays. So I looked up the church, and I see that the pastor looks really familiar. And I'm like, I can't wrap my brain around where I know this man from. So I sent a screenshot to my mom, and I'm like, do you know who this man is? She texts me back, and she's like, how do you know him? Why are you going to his church? And all these questions. So she called me, and I was like, why are you acting like that? What's the big deal? And she was like, well, you're related to him. And I was like, so you're related to him? I'm not getting it. Like, what's going on? And she was like, no, that's your birth uncle. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't although it was like really shocking to me, I didn't let it bother me. So I invite my god sister to come with me to the church. And we go to the church, and it was a Tuesday night, so it was like a Bible study. So right when I walked in the church, I had a panic attack. For one, because I've never seen anyone that looks like me. So that was a blessing right there. I was just extremely happy to see someone that looks like me. So before I went to the church, my mom told me not to reveal our identities because it has something to do with adoption, and they're not supposed to know who you are. So we went in there with two fake names. I can't remember the name, but it was crazy. And then the preacher starts preaching about accepting your true identity and adoption. So we're sitting there like, this is crazy. Like, he's talking about what we're here for. And after church goes by, we were thinking about not saying anything to him, but we did. And I tell him, I'm like, look, I've been looking for my birth mom. I got invited to this church by this boy. I don't know where he is. I showed him the invitation, and he said that he's never made an invitation like that a day in his life, and he doesn't know who the boy is. So we go in his office, and I start telling him how I've been looking for my birth mom and everything. And he's like, okay, why are you telling me this? He's like kind of confused. So I say the woman's name, which is my mother, and he's like, well, yeah, that's my niece. That's my niece. And I was like, well, that's my mom. So he didn't believe me. And so he starts calling all these places, calling different people, and they're like, well, what happened to so-and-so's children? How many children does she have? And they're like, well, she has 3 that's no longer living, 3 that are girls, and there's some boys, and then there's 2 that we don't know what happened to them. There's a girl and a boy that we don't know what happened to them. Some people he called thought I was dead. Some people thought I was in a foster home, and some people know that I'm adopted. So he called one person that really knew, and she was like describing me and saying how old I would be. And he goes, well, how old would the girl be? And she's like either 16 or 17. And so that's when he asked me, he goes, baby, how old are you? And I say, I'm 17. And he goes, before I hang up this phone, I want to ask you one more question. Is this the girl we tried looking for 4 years ago? And she says yes, and he starts crying. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I'm sitting there in shock, and he starts telling me everything about her. And he introduced me to his wife, and he's like, wife, telling her everything that's happened. And the wife goes, well, baby, where do you work? And I'm like, I work at Kroger. And she was like, really? We go to Kroger all the time. Which one? And I tell her which one I work at. And she's like, he goes, which one did you say? And I said it again. And he was like, wife, that's that girl. That's that girl. That's that girl. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm not understanding. And he goes, do you remember the day I came in your line and I said, you look like someone I knew? And I was like, that was you. That's how I know that you look familiar to me. And he was like, yeah. And he asked his wife, he goes, wife, what did I say as I was walking out of the store? And she goes, "You said she looked like your niece," which is my mom. And that's how I met my birth uncle. Job at Kroger would have opened up so many doors for me. I would have never expected that to happen. The most surprising thing I found out was that my birth family was so close to me. I know some of them live in my neighborhood. I know some of them have been visited my church before. I just think it's so crazy how you never know who you're talking to. The hardest part of this journey has been actually being at this moment, because, you know, as you're adopted, you kind of never expect anything like this to happen. So the hardest part has been like kind of like settling where I am and actually knowing that it actually happened to me and going forward with it. A lot of people ask me when I found out I was adopted, but I never recall a time where my parents sat me down and said, "Hey, you're adopted." I do remember them always raising me up, like watching movies like Elf or Annie or Like Mike. Those are kind of like movies like for instance, Elf, he was always raised in a place that was other than where he was supposed to be or other than people like him. And I remember sitting down one day in the bed and I saw this commercial and they were like, "Come adopt an orphan." And I'm like, "Well, who would want to buy a child?" And that's when my mom goes, "Well, that's how we got you." And I was too young to understand, but that's the only day that I remember finding that out. The most surprising thing that I found out was that I had sisters and brothers, one that's the same age as me, some people that's older than me, and all that. If I had the chance to tell my birth family anything at this moment, I would tell them that a lot of people have something in their head telling them that it was the wrong decision, but I would tell them that actually it was the best decision and that I'm truly grateful for where I am today, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have. I wouldn't be able to be on the dance team, have a car, have this and that. I wouldn't have any opportunities that I have today. And I also have to tell them that I would love to meet all of them one day. And I would also love for to get together and actually know who they are, because that's something that I've been missing out on my whole life.